The eviction notice sat on our kitchen counter like a death sentence, red letters screaming 48 hours. I stared at it until the words blurred, my fingers numb from the double shift I'd just worked at the cafe. My mother coughed from the bedroom, that wet, rattling sound that meant her medication was running out again. We'd run out of everything. Time, money, hope. I was 22 and drowning. The university scholarship covered tuition, but not life. Not the rent in this cramped city apartment with its leaking ceiling and broken heater. Not my mother's treatments. Not the groceries I'd been stretching thinner each week, eating instant noodles so she could have something with protein. I'd picked up every shift I could, studied between orders, smiled at customers while my feet ached and my vision swam from exhaustion. It still wasn't enough. "Lila, honey?" My mother's voice drifted out, weak but trying to sound strong. She always tried to sound strong. "Did you eat?" "Yes, Mom," I lied, rinsing my coffee mug in the sink. The water ran cold. "Of course it did. Rest, okay? I'll handle everything." But I couldn't handle everything. That was the problem. I grabbed my backpack for my evening class, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in my chest. As I locked the door, Mrs. Chen from next door peeked out, her expression a mix of pity and relief that it wasn't her family facing eviction. I couldn't even be angry. In this building, we were all one emergency away from the street. The cafe where I worked was a small place tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store, the kind of spot that survived on regulars and students looking for cheap coffee. I'd been pulling doubles there for 3 months, and Marco, the night manager, had stopped asking if I was okay. He knew the answer. That evening, as I tied my apron with shaking hands, Marco approached me with something odd in his expression, curiosity mixed with concern. "Someone left this for you," he said, holding out a business card between 2 fingers like it might bite. The card was heavy, expensive, cream-colored with embossed lettering that caught the light. No company name, no title, just a name and a phone number. Asterisk Damien Viscari. Asterisk, who was he? I asked, turning the card over. The back was blank. Marco shrugged. Came in around noon. Tall guy, suit probably cost more than my car. Ordered an espresso, barely touched it. Watched you for about 10 minutes, then left that and a $50 tip. My stomach twisted. Watched me? Not in a creepy way. More like... Marco searched for words. Like he was deciding something. I should have thrown the card away. Should have recognized it for what it was, trouble in expensive packaging. But when you're desperate enough, even trouble starts to look like opportunity. I slipped the card into my pocket and tried to focus on my shift, but my fingers kept finding it, tracing the embossed letters. Asterisk Damien Viscari. Asterisk. Who was he? What did he want? By the time I finished at midnight, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. A wrong person, a mistake. Rich people did weird things. But as I walked to the bus stop, the card felt like it was burning through my pocket. When I got home and checked on my mother sleeping fitfully, her breathing labored, I pulled it out again. 48 hours until eviction. The medication she needed cost $300. The back rent was $2,000. I had $73 in my account, and a max shift schedule that would still leave us $1,000 short. I sat at our tiny kitchen table, the eviction notice on one side, the mysterious business card on the other. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, flickering like my dying options. Asterisk, what's the worst that could happen? Asterisk, I picked up my phone before I could talk myself out of it. The number rang twice before a voice answered deep, controlled, with an edge of command that made my spine straighten involuntarily. Miss Hart. I wondered if you'd call. How do you know my name? My voice came out sharper than intended, fear masking itself as anger. I make it my business to know things. The cafe closes in 30 minutes. I'll meet you there. I don't even know who you... Yes or no, Miss Hart. I'm offering you an opportunity. You can accept it or continue waiting for a miracle that won't come. The line went dead. I sat there, heart hammering, every instinct screaming that this was dangerous. But danger was relative when you were already falling. At least this way, I'd know what I was falling into. I texted Marco that I needed to stay late to clean. He didn't question it, probably grateful for the help. But instead of cleaning, I waited, watching the door as the last customers trickled out and the street outside grew quiet. At 12:30, a black car pulled up outside. Not a taxi or an Uber, An actual town car with tinted windows and chrome that gleamed under the streetlights. The driver stayed in front. The rear door opened, and he stepped out. Damien Viscari. Even through the cafe window, he commanded attention. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of fluid confidence that came from never having to question his place in the world. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, probably worth more than 3 months of my rent, but it was his face that stopped my breath. Sharp features, dark eyes that seemed to see through walls, and a thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow that suggested he'd lived through things that would break most people. He looked like danger and salvation wrapped in expensive fabric. The bell chimed as he entered. Marco, wiping down the counter, looked up and immediately found somewhere else to be. That told me something: people recognized power when they saw it, and they got out of its way. Damien Viscari moved to the corner booth, the one I'd been sitting at during my break when he'd apparently been watching me. He didn't sit right away, just stood there waiting, and I realized with a start that he was waiting for me to move first. I grabbed 2 cups of coffee, something to do with my hands, and walked over. My legs felt steadier than I'd expected. Maybe because I'd already made my choice the moment I called that number. Mr. Viscari. Damien. He sat only after I did, and even that felt like a negotiation. You're wondering why I'm here. Among other things. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Direct. I appreciate that. He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup but didn't drink. I have a problem, Miss Hart. A problem that requires a very specific solution. And that solution involves me somehow? It requires a wife. I blinked. Of all the things I'd expected him to say, that wasn't on the list. I'm sorry, what? Not a real wife? He continued, his tone matter of fact, like he was discussing a business contract. Not in any way that matters. I need someone to fulfill a legal obligation for exactly 1 week. 7 days. After that, the arrangement ends. You walk away with enough money to solve your immediate problems, and we never see each other again. This is insane. This is necessity. His dark eyes locked onto mine, and I felt the full weight of his attention. It was like standing in front of a predator, thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. You need money urgently. I need a temporary spouse to satisfy certain family requirements. It's a simple transaction. Marriage isn't simple. This one is. A courthouse ceremony, a few signatures, 1 week of cohabitation to maintain appearances, then an annulment. You'll live in my home during that time, well-fed, safe, with access to anything you need. At the end of the week, you receive $50,000, clear and free, more than enough to cover your mother's medical bills and your rent for the next year. The number hit me like a physical blow. $50,000. It was impossible. It was life-changing. It was, why me? I managed. There are agencies for this kind of thing. Professionals. Agencies leave paper trails. Professionals talk. I need someone with no connections to my world. Someone who has strong motivation to complete the arrangement and then disappear quietly. He tilted his head slightly. You're intelligent, self-sufficient, and desperate enough to be sitting here instead of calling the police. You also have no social media presence, no complicated relationships, and a night schedule that means very few people track your daily movements. You're perfect. The clinical assessment of my life should have offended me. Instead, it just felt accurate. I was invisible. Forgettable, the kind of person who could slip in and out of someone's life without leaving ripples. What's the catch? No catch. Just rules. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, a contract, I realized. You live in my home for 7 days. You attend one family dinner as my wife. You don't ask questions about my business or my family. You don't attempt to contact anyone from your previous life during the week. And at the end, you take the money and forget this ever happened. And if I refuse, then I wish you luck with your eviction. No malice in his voice, just fact. You have 48 hours, Miss Hart. I have 7 days before my window closes. We both have deadlines. I looked at the contract without touching it, my mind racing. This was crazy. Illegal. Probably. Definitely dangerous. Men who operated like this, all cash and secrecy and midnight meetings, weren't the kind who played by normal rules. But then, normal rules hadn't saved my mother. Normal rules were why we were drowning. What happens during the week? I asked. What exactly would I have to do? Be present. Play the role when necessary. The family dinner will require you to be convincing we're newlyweds. Young love. Simple. The rest of the time. You can read, study, whatever you like. I have a library, a pool, and enough space that we'd rarely have to interact if you prefer it that way. And after? The annulment? Clean and quick. The marriage was never consummated. We married in haste, realized our mistake. Standard procedure. The paperwork is already prepared. Of course it was. This man planned for everything. I thought of my mother's labored breathing, the eviction notice, the scholarship I'd lose if I couldn't maintain an address, 3 years of work toward my degree, about to evaporate because I couldn't afford to exist. 50,000, I said. Half up front. 10 up front. The rest when the week ends and the papers are signed. 25. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. Done. Do you accept, Miss Hart? The question hung between us, heavy with implications I couldn't fully grasp. Every logical part of my brain screamed to run. But logic didn't pay rent. Logic didn't buy medication. Logic didn't save people. I picked up the contract with trembling fingers. I accept. Something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe, or relief. He produced a pen from his pocket, expensive and heavy. I read through the contract quickly, my law class background kicking in. Most of it matched what he'd said. 1 week cohabitation, appearance at one family event, payment upon completion, confidentiality clauses. But there was something at the bottom, a paragraph in smaller print about the binding nature of agreements and the authority of family law. The language was dense, legal speak that would take hours to fully parse. This section here, I said, pointing. What exactly does it mean? Standard language. The marriage is legal and binding for the duration specified. His tone was casual, almost dismissive. It protects both of us, ensures I pay, ensures you fulfill your end. I hesitated, then signed. What choice did I have? Damien, countersigned below my name, his signature a sharp slash of black ink. Then he pulled out his phone and made a transfer. Mine buzzed a moment later. Asterisk $25,000 deposited to your account. Asterisk. I stared at the number, at the comma that represented more money than I'd ever had at once. It was real. This was actually happening. The ceremony is tomorrow at 10, Damien said, standing. I'll send a car to your address at 9:30. Wear something simple, we're not making a production of this. Tomorrow? My deadline is 7 days from tomorrow, Miss Hart. The clock is already ticking. He buttoned his suit jacket. All business again. 1 week. Then you're free. He walked to the door, moved like he owned not just the cafe but the entire block. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. Welcome to the family, Lila Hart. The way he said it, not quite a greeting, more like a claiming, sent a chill down my spine that I couldn't quite name. Then he was gone, the town car pulling away into the night, leaving me alone with a contract, $25,000, and the distinct feeling that I'd just made a deal with someone far more dangerous than I understood. I sat there for a long time, the cafe lights humming overhead. Finally, I pulled out my phone and transferred money to the landlord, to the pharmacy, to every screaming bill that had been crushing us. 1 week. I could survive 1 week, couldn't I? The morning came too fast. I'd barely slept, lying awake imagining all the ways this could go wrong. But when the black town car pulled up at exactly 9:30, I was dressed in the only semi-formal thing I owned, a navy dress I'd worn to a cousin's wedding 2 years ago, and had told my mother I was helping a friend with a last-minute project. The lie tasted bitter, but what was I supposed to say? Asterisk. I'm marrying a stranger for money, asterisk? The driver didn't speak during the ride, and I didn't try to make conversation. We drove to the financial district, where old stone buildings housed the machinery of law and government. The courthouse was surprisingly quiet for a Friday morning, just a few couples and their families scattered through the hallways. Damien was waiting at the clerk's office, looking impossibly composed in a black suit. Next to him stood an older man with silver hair and a briefcase that probably cost more than my car would have if I'd owned one. Lila, Damien said, and hearing my first name in that deep voice did something strange to my equilibrium. This is Robert Chen, my attorney. He'll be our witness. Robert nodded politely, his expression carefully neutral. He'd done this before, I realized. Maybe many times. The ceremony itself was surreal, sterile, and efficient. nothing like the weddings I'd imagined as a girl. A bored clerk read through the vows in a monotone while we stood in a small room that smelled like coffee and old paper. I repeated words that felt like they belonged to someone else. I, Lila Marie Hart, take you, Damien Viscari. His hand was warm when it took mine for the ring, a simple platinum band that fit perfectly, which meant he'd somehow gotten my ring size, another detail he'd planned for. When the clerk said, "You may kiss the bride," Damien's eyes met mine with something that might have been amusement. He leaned in, his hand cupping my jaw with surprising gentleness, and pressed his lips to mine in a kiss that was perfectly proper and entirely performative, except for the heat that flared where his skin touched mine, except for the way my breath caught when he pulled back. "Congratulations," the clerk said without enthusiasm, pushing papers across the desk. "Sign here, here, and here." I signed. Damien signed. Robert signed as witness. Just like that, it was done. Mrs. Lila Viscari. The name felt foreign, like trying on someone else's identity. Outside, Damien gestured to the town car. "We'll go to the house now. Your things?" "I'll need to. Get them already handled. I sent someone to pack your essentials this morning. Your mother has been informed you're staying with a friend for a week to help with a project." I stopped walking. "You what?" "I told you I planned for everything." He opened the car door, waiting. "Your mother is also no longer worried about rent or medical bills. The accounts have been settled. She believes you received an emergency grant from the university." Part of me wanted to be furious at the invasion, the presumption, but a larger part felt the weight I'd been carrying for months suddenly lift. My mother was safe. That was what mattered. I slid into the car. The drive took 40 minutes, leaving the dense city behind for rolling hills and estates, hidden behind stone walls and iron gates. We turned onto a private road marked only by a crest, worked into the metalwork, a lion and a sword, elegant and fierce. The Vescari estate. When the gates opened and the house came into view, my breath caught. It wasn't a house, it was a mansion. All stone and glass, and architectural presence that dominated the landscape. Gardens stretched in every direction, manicured to intimidating perfection. Fountains sparkled in the late morning sun. "This is where you live?" I asked, immediately feeling stupid. Obviously, this was where he lived. One of the family properties. Damien said it like it was nothing, like everyone had multiple estates. "You'll have your own wing. Privacy when you want it." The car stopped in front of massive double doors. Staff appeared immediately, an older woman in a neat uniform, 2 younger women behind her, all watching me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe, or calculation. "Mrs. Vescari," the older woman said, the title sounding wrong attached to me. "Welcome. I'm Mrs. Morrison, the house manager. If you need anything at all, please let me know." "Thank you," I managed, following Damien inside. The foyer alone was larger than my entire apartment, marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost 6 figures, a staircase sweeping up to a second level. Everything whispered old money, the kind that came from generations of wealth so deep you stopped counting. "Your room is this way," Damien said, leading me down a corridor lined with paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. "Breakfast is at 8, dinner at 7. You're welcome to explore the grounds, use any of the facilities. The West Wing is private, that's where my office is located. Don't go there." The way he said it, casual but absolute, made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. We stopped at a door that opened into a suite that could have housed my entire family. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, with a sitting area by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the gardens. An attached bathroom featured a tub that could fit 3 people. "Your things are in the closet," Damien said. "If you need additional clothing, Mrs. Morrison can arrange it." "This is..." I struggled for words. "Excessive. This is standard." He checked his watch, a simple, elegant piece that probably cost more than a car. "I have business to attend to. Dinner is at 7. Dress is casual. You're not required to join me, but it would be preferable." He was already moving toward the door when I found my voice. "Damien." He paused, looking back. "Thank you. For my mother. The bills." Something shifted in his expression, softening the hard edges for just a moment. "You married me, Lila. That makes your family my responsibility, at least for the next 7 days." Then he was gone, the door clicking shut with a finality that made the enormous room feel suddenly very empty. I stood there, processing. 7 days ago, I'd been drowning. Now I was standing in a mansion, wearing a wedding ring, married to a man I didn't know. I explored the suite, finding my meager belongings hanging in a closet the size of my old bedroom. Someone had unpacked, carefully, organized everything by type and color. My textbooks were stacked on the desk by the window. Even my phone charger had been plugged in by the bed. Efficient, thorough, slightly terrifying. The afternoon passed in a strange suspension of reality. I tried to study but couldn't focus, my mind spinning. Eventually, I ventured out, exploring the halls. Every turn revealed more impossible luxury. A library with books floor to ceiling, a sunroom filled with exotic plants, a pool house that was larger than most people's actual houses, and through it all, a strange quiet. Staff moved silently, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. I passed several closed doors and wondered what was behind them. Once, I heard voices low, intense, speaking rapid Italian and hurried past. At 6:30, I changed into the only other nice thing I owned and made my way to the dining room, following the sound of silverware being arranged. The table could have seated 20, but only 2 places were set, one at the head, one to its right. Damien was already there, reading something on his phone. He'd changed into dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that were surprisingly muscular. He looked up when I entered, and his eyes did a quick assessment that made me hyper-aware of my bargain dress and drugstore makeup. "You look nice," he said, standing until I sat. Old-fashioned manners from someone who clearly existed in a different world. "Thank you. This is a lot of table. Family dinners get crowded." He poured wine into my glass without asking if I wanted it. "How was your afternoon?" "Surreal. Your house is not mine. The family's. I just live here." That word again, family, with a capital F. The way he said it made it sound less like relatives and more like an institution. Dinner arrived, course after course of food I couldn't name, each more delicious than the last. We ate in relative silence, the only sound the clink of silverware and the distant murmur of staff in the kitchen. "Tell me about yourself," Damien said eventually. "Beyond what's in the file." "You have a file on me?" "Of course, but files are facts. They don't capture personality." I took a sip of wine, buying time. "What did you tell the stranger you'd married?" "There's not much to tell. Small-town girl, got into university on scholarship, trying to build something better. Pretty standard story. Nothing about you is standard, Lila." The way he said my name like he was tasting it, testing its weight, sent an unexpected shiver through me. "What about you?" I asked, deflecting. "Who is Damien Viscari?" "Someone who honors his obligations." A non-answer wrapped in formality. "Someone who values loyalty above all else. And someone who needs a temporary wife for mysterious family reasons." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Everyone has their complications. What kind of business are you in?" The file didn't mention that. "Import-export. Family business going back generations." The words were smooth, practiced. Boring corporate things. I didn't believe him. Import-export businessmen didn't need secret marriages or have private wings in mansions or speak about family like it was a separate nation-state. But I'd signed a contract promising not to ask questions, so I let it slide. "The family dinner you mentioned," I said instead. "When is it?" "Saturday. Tomorrow." He refilled his wine glass. "It's nothing formal. Just meeting a few relatives, establishing that we're legitimate. You'll need to be convincing." "Convincing how?" "The basics. We met at the cafe where you work. Fast attraction. Impulsive decision. Young love overriding common sense. They'll be skeptical but ultimately pleased that I've settled down." He leaned back, studying me. "Can you play the part? Of a girl who impulsively married a man she barely knows? I'm living it." That almost smile again. Fair point. After dinner, Damien excused himself to his office, that forbidden West Wing. I returned to my suite and tried to process the day. Married. Living in a mansion. Eating meals with a man whose eyes held secrets I couldn't begin to guess at. I called my mother from the burner phone I'd kept separate. She sounded better than she had in months, her voice bright with relief. The bills were paid. She could rest. She was so proud of me for getting that grant. The lie sat heavy in my stomach, but not as heavy as the alternative would have been. That night, I lay in the too large bed in the too quiet room and stared at the ring on my finger. Platinum caught the moonlight streaming through the windows, throwing small rainbows across the ceiling. 1 week, 6 days left. Then I heard a sharp crack from somewhere outside, like a branch breaking, or a gunshot. I went to the window, peering into the darkness. The gardens were still, peaceful. Nothing moved. But then I saw them figures near the tree line, dark shapes moving with purpose. A flash of something metallic. More movement, deliberate and coordinated. Then silence. I stood there for a long time, heart hammering, until the shapes disappeared and the night was still again. When I finally pulled away from the window, my hands were shaking. What kind of business did Damien Viscari really run? What kind of family required armed men patrolling the grounds in the middle of the night? And what had I really married into? Morning came with soft sunlight and the smell of coffee drifting from somewhere downstairs. For a disoriented moment, I forgot where I was. Then memory crashed back: the mansion, the marriage, the gunfire I'd heard that might have been my imagination. I dressed in jeans and a sweater, feeling underdressed even in casual clothes, and followed the scent to a breakfast room I hadn't seen before, smaller than the formal dining room, with windows overlooking a garden fountain. Damien was already there, reading a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, like something from another era. He looked up when I entered. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "Well enough." I poured coffee from the carafe on the sideboard. "Do you have security?" "Extensive security." "Why?" "I heard something last night. Saw people outside. Perimeter patrol. Standard procedure." He turned a page, unconcerned. "This property has valuable assets. We protect them." Assets. Not art or family heirlooms. Assets. I sat across from him, adding sugar to my coffee. "What kind of valuable assets require armed patrol?" He looked at me over the newspaper, dark eyes unreadable. "The kind worth protecting. Is this going to be a problem, Lila?" There was something in his tone, not quite a threat, but a reminder. I'd agreed not to ask questions. "No," I said. "No problem." "Good." He folded the newspaper, giving me his full attention. "Tonight's dinner is at 6. My cousin Angelo will be there, along with his wife Maria. My Aunt Sophia, the family matriarch. Possibly a few others. They'll want to assess you." "Assess me?" "Determine if you're worthy of the name Viscari." He said it matter-of-factly, like being judged by strangers was perfectly normal. "They'll be polite but probing, looking for weaknesses, inconsistencies in our story." "Why do I feel like I'm preparing for an interrogation?" "Because you are." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "But you're intelligent and quick. You'll be fine. Just remember we're in love. Impulsive but genuine. Everything else deflect to me. Where will you be today?" "Working. I have meetings in the city." He paused at the door. "Feel free to explore the grounds. Read, swim, whatever you like. Mrs. Morrison will help with anything you need. Just stay out of the West Wing. I remember." Something flickered across his face, approval maybe. 6 days left, Lila. Then your life goes back to normal." After he left, the house felt even larger and more empty. I spent the morning in the library, surrounded by books that probably cost more than my education. Some were in Italian, others in languages I didn't recognize. I found a collection of Russian literature and lost myself in Tolstoy until my eyes burned. Lunch was brought to me on a tray: soup and bread and fruit arranged like art. I thanked the young maid who delivered it, but she barely met my eyes before hurrying away. They were afraid of something. Or someone. In the afternoon, I ventured outside. The gardens were immaculate: roses and lavender, hedges trimmed into geometric precision, paths of white stone winding between beds of flowers I couldn't name. At the far end, I found the pool house Damien had mentioned. Inside was a crystal-clear infinity pool that seemed to pour into the horizon. I didn't swim. I hadn't thought to pack a suit, and asking for one felt presumptuous, but I sat at the edge, dangling my feet in water that was perfectly heated. This could be someone's real life. This kind of luxury. This kind of peace. But it wasn't mine. In 6 days, I'd be back in my cramped apartment, back to double shifts and instant noodles. This was just a beautiful interlude, a week of playing pretend before reality reasserted itself. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear the footsteps until a voice spoke behind me. "You must be the new wife." I turned, startled. A man stood there, younger than Damien, maybe late 20s, with the same sharp features but a softer edge. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. I'm Angelo, Damien's cousin." He extended a hand, and I shook it, feeling the calluses that suggested he did more than sit in boardrooms. "We'll meet officially tonight, but I wanted to introduce myself first." "Lila." I said, standing. Nice to meet you. Likewise. He studied me with open curiosity. Have to say, you're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more polished. Damien usually goes for the society type. You seem normal. He said it like a compliment. How'd you two meet? I repeated the story Damien had given me: the cafe, the attraction, the impulsive decision. Angelo listened, nodding, but his eyes were sharp, cataloging every detail. Fast work, he said when I finished. Damien's not usually impulsive. Maybe I'm special. Maybe. He glanced back at the house, then lowered his voice slightly. Look, I don't know what arrangement you two have, and I'm not asking, but a word of advice: the family can be intense. Don't let them intimidate you. Damien chose you for a reason. Stand your ground. Before I could ask what he meant, he was already walking away, hands in his pockets, whistling something operatic. I stood there, unease prickling at the back of my neck. Everyone kept talking about the family like it was an entity unto itself. And the way Angelo had said, time's arrangement, times like he knew this marriage was something other than what it appeared. How many people knew the truth? I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for the dinner, trying on the few outfits I'd brought and hating all of them. Finally, I knocked on Mrs. Morrison's door. I need help, I admitted. I don't have anything appropriate for tonight. She smiled, the first real warmth I'd seen from the staff. Mr. Viscari anticipated this. Come with me. She led me to a room I hadn't explored yet, a dressing room filled with clothes still bearing tags. Designer labels I recognized from magazines, in my size. He had these sent over yesterday, Mrs. Morrison said. Pick whatever you like. I ran my fingers over silk and cashmere, feeling overwhelmed. This is too much. This is what's expected. Mrs. Viscari has a certain standard to maintain. Mrs. Viscari. The title still felt foreign. I chose a deep green dress, elegant but simple, with sleeves that covered my arms and a hem that hit just above my knees. Mrs. Morrison helped with my hair, pinning it up in a way that made me look older, more sophisticated. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Perfect, Mrs. Morrison said. You look like you belong here. But I didn't. That was the problem. At 6, I made my way to the formal living room where Damien had told me to meet. He was there, along with 4 other people Angelo I recognized. The others were new. Damien's eyes found me immediately, and something in his expression shifted. Appreciation, maybe, or surprise. He crossed to me, taking my hand and pressing a kiss to my knuckles in a gesture that felt practiced, but still sent warmth up my arm. You look beautiful, he murmured, then turned to the others. Everyone, this is Lila, my wife. The older woman, Sophia, I assumed, looked me up and down with eyes that missed nothing. She was elegant, draped in black, with silver hair and the kind of presence that demanded respect. Lila, she said, her accent still carrying traces of Italian despite decades in America. Welcome to the family. I'm Sophia Viscari, Damien's aunt. This is Angelo's wife, Maria, and his brother, Luca. Maria smiled warmly, but Luca just nodded, his expression neutral. Thank you for having me, I said, aware that every word was being weighed and measured. Sit, Sophia commanded, gesturing to the sofa. Tell me how you stole my nephew's heart. The interrogation had begun. I repeated the cafe story again, with Damien adding details that made it sound more real: how I'd laughed at something a customer said, how that laugh had caught his attention, how we'd talked until closing, then every night after, how he'd known within days that I was different. The lies came easier with him beside me, his hand resting casually on my lower back, a gesture of possession and protection. Very romantic, Sophia said, sipping her wine. And your family? What do they think of this whirlwind marriage? My mother is happy for me. She wants me to be happy. And your father? He passed when I was young. A flicker of something crossed Sophia's face, sympathy maybe. I see. And what are you studying at university? Political science and pre-law. Luca leaned forward at that, interest sparking. Law? Planning to be a lawyer? Eventually. I want to help people who can't afford proper representation. Noble, Sophia said, though her tone suggested she found it quaint. And how do you plan to balance that with your duties as Damien's wife? There it was, the trap, suggesting my ambitions were incompatible with this life. I'm good at multitasking, I said, meeting her gaze steadily. And Damien supports my education. Of course he does. Damien's hand squeezed gently at my back. Lila's intelligence is one of the things I love most about her. The word times love times hung in the air, and I wondered if anyone believed it. Dinner was called, and we moved to the dining room. The meal was another production, multiple courses, wine flowing freely, conversation that danced around topics I didn't fully understand. Business dealings, family obligations, names I didn't recognize. But throughout it all, Damien played his part perfectly. Attentive, affectionate, the picture of a man newly in love. His hand found mine under the table. He laughed at my jokes, deferred to my opinions, created a bubble around us that said times were united against the world. Asterisk. It was a masterful performance, and despite knowing it was fake, I found myself leaning into it. After dinner, as the others lingered over coffee and dessert, Damien excused us. "Long day," he said. "We'll say goodnight." In the hallway, away from watchful eyes, he released my hand. "You did well," he said. Sophia was impressed. She has a terrifying way of showing it. She's protective of the family, but you passed the test. He loosened his tie, and I caught a glimpse of a tattoo on his chest, something dark and intricate that disappeared beneath his collar. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be easier." "What happens tomorrow?" "Nothing. Normal day. You can relax, study, whatever you like. The hard part is over." But as I walked back to my suite, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hard part was just beginning. That night, I woke to voices urgent, angry, speaking rapid Italian. I crept to my door and eased it open. Down the hall, light spilled from under Damien's office door in that forbidden west wing. I knew I shouldn't. I'd been explicitly told not to. But curiosity outweighed caution. I moved silently down the hall, staying close to the wall. The voices grew clearer, Damien and at least two others, arguing about something. I caught words, times, shipment asterisk, Moretti asterisk, liability asterisk. Then a guard rounded the corner. We saw each other at the same moment. His hand moved toward his jacket where a gun must have been holstered, and I froze, heart stopping. "Mrs. Vascari," he said, his voice flat. "You're not supposed to be in this wing." "I got lost," I said quickly. "The house is so big." "Your suite is in the east wing. This is west." "Right. Sorry. The office door opened. Damien stood there, still in his dinner clothes but with his tie gone and his sleeves rolled up. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of maps on the walls, computers showing what looked like shipping manifests. His expression when he saw me was unreadable. "Lila, what are you doing?" "I got lost," I repeated, knowing how weak it sounded. Damien dismissed the guard with a gesture, then stepped into the hall, closing the door behind him. He moved toward me with that same predatory grace, and suddenly the hallway felt very small. "No, you didn't." He stopped just close enough to make me tilt my head back to meet his eyes. "You were curious. I understand. But this is the one rule that matters, Lila. Stay out of my business." "What kind of business requires armed guards and midnight meetings? The kind you don't want to know about." He touched my chin, tilting my face up. 6 days. After that, you forget everything you've seen here. Can you do that?" I should have said yes. Should have retreated to my room and stopped asking questions. Instead, I said, "Who are you really? Damien Vascari?" For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then he leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. "Someone you should be afraid of." He stepped back, leaving me cold where his heat had been. "Go to bed, Lila, and stay in your wing." I fled, heart racing, back to the safety of my suite. But sleep didn't come easily, because I'd seen something in his eyes in that moment, not anger, but warning, like he was trying to protect me from something, or from himself. The next few days fell into a strange routine. Mornings I spent in the library or by the pool. Afternoons, Damien would return, and we'd share lunch or dinner, making small talk that revealed nothing. He was courteous, professional, maintaining the perfect distance of a business arrangement, but sometimes I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. And sometimes, when he'd brush past me in a doorway, or his hand would rest on my back while introducing me to staff, the touch would linger just a second too long. The attraction simmering between us was becoming harder to ignore. On the 4th day, I found him in the library. He sat in one of the leather chairs, reading something on a tablet, his expression troubled. "Everything okay?" I asked. He looked up, And for a moment his mask slipped. He looked tired, stressed, human. Just business complications. Nothing that concerns you. I should have left it at that. Instead, I sat across from him. You know, for a fake marriage, we barely know each other. That was intentional. But don't you think it's strange? I'm living in your house, wearing your ring, and I don't even know basic things about you. What you like, what you fear, who you are when you're not being the controlled businessman. Those things don't matter. In 3 days, this ends. 3 days. I'd been counting too. Then what? Then you go back to your life. You finish your degree, help people who need lawyers, live the normal life you were supposed to have. And you? I continue being who I've always been. He set the tablet aside. Why do you ask? Because sometimes you look at me like this isn't just business anymore. The words hung between us, dangerous and honest. Damien stood, crossing to where I sat. He towered over me, and I had to crane my neck to meet his eyes. Would you prefer it wasn't? My heart hammered. I don't know what I prefer. I just know that lying has gotten harder. Lying to who? The family? To myself. He made a sound low in his throat, frustration or desire or some combination. Then he was pulling me up, his hands on my arms, and suddenly we were inches apart. This is a bad idea, Lila. I know. You don't know anything about my world. The things I've done, the things I'll do, the danger. Then tell me. For a moment I thought he would. His eyes searched mine, some internal war playing out behind them. Then he released me, stepping back. 3 days, he repeated. Don't make this complicated. He left me there, heart racing, more confused than ever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment in the library, the heat in his eyes, the way my body had responded to his proximity. This was supposed to be simple a transaction, nothing more. But it had stopped being simple the moment I'd signed that contract. Around midnight, unable to stand the restlessness anymore, I went downstairs for water. The house was dark, quiet, only emergency lighting casting shadows. I was padding back toward the stairs when I heard the voice. Moretti's making moves. We need to respond. I froze. The voice was coming from Damien's office. I should have kept walking. I didn't. I crept closer, pressing against the wall. The door was slightly ajar, voices drifting out. If we don't act, he'll see it as weakness. That was Angelo. The shipment tomorrow is the perfect opportunity. Too risky. The feds are watching. Damien's voice, hard with command. We wait. Wait for what? For him to take everything we've built. Angelo, I said we wait. Silence. Then another voice, Luca. The girl. She's a liability. She's asking questions. My blood went cold. She knows nothing. She's smart, Damien. She'll figure it out. And then what? She walks away and we hope she keeps her mouth shut? She's not a problem. She's leverage. Moretti already knows about her. If he gets to her first, he won't. The ice in Damien's voice could have frozen fire. No one touches her. That's an order. More silence. Then footsteps, coming toward the door. I ran, as silently as I could, back to the stairs and up to my suite. My hands shook as I locked the door, breathing hard. Asterisk Moretti. Shipment. Feds. Liability. Asterisk. The pieces clicked together with terrible clarity. Import-export business. Armed guards. Midnight meetings. Damien Vescari wasn't just wealthy. He was Mafia, and I'd married into it. I spent the night pacing, mind racing. Everything made sense now, the secrecy, the contract's binding language, the way his family had assessed me like I was being brought into something bigger than a marriage. I'd been so focused on surviving, on saving my mother, that I hadn't seen the obvious truth. Or maybe I'd seen it and chosen not to believe. The question now was, what to do about it. I could run. I had some of the money enough to disappear, start over somewhere new. But that would mean breaking the contract, and something told me the Vescari family didn't take kindly to broken agreements. I could stay the 3 remaining days, take the rest of the money, and pray they let me walk away. But I'd heard. Luca, I was a liability. People who knew too much were problems that needed solving. Or I could confront Damien and demand the truth. By morning, I decided on the last option, because if I was going to survive this, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I found him at breakfast, reading his newspaper like always. But this time, when I sat across from him, I didn't make small talk. "Tell me the truth." He looked up, eyes sharp. "About what? About who you really are? What business you're really in? Why you needed a wife so desperately that you'd pay $50,000 for one?" He set the paper down slowly. "You were told not to ask questions. I heard you last night, you and Angelo and Luca, talking about shipments and Moretti and keeping me away from the feds." I leaned forward. "I'm not stupid, Damien. I know what you are." For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then he stood, moving to close the dining room doors, sealing us in. When he turned back, the mask was gone. In its place was something harder, more dangerous. "You want the truth? Fine." He sat back down, his gaze never leaving mine. "The Vescari family has controlled this territory for 4 generations. We run legitimate businesses, real estate, shipping, hospitality, but we also run less legitimate operations. Protection, gambling, import of certain goods that official channels would frown upon. We maintain order in our territory, protect our people, and eliminate threats to our interests. That's what we are. That's what I am." The confirmation should have terrified me. Instead, I felt strangely calm. "And the marriage? My father died 8 months ago. According to family law, our law, not the government's, I can't formally take over as head until I'm married. It's archaic tradition, meant to ensure stability and succession. I needed a wife to secure my position, but I couldn't marry someone from another family that would create obligations and complications. An outsider was safer. Someone with no ties to our world, who could fulfill the requirement and then disappear. So I was convenient. You were necessary." He leaned back. "But you've become more complicated than I anticipated." "Because I ask questions? Because I care whether you're safe." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it surprised me. That wasn't part of the plan. My heart did something complicated in my chest. "What happens now? Now that I know? That depends on you. You have 3 days left on our agreement. At the end of those 3 days, you can take the money and leave. I'll provide protection. Make sure you're not touched by any of this. Or, he met my eyes with an intensity that stole my breath. Or you stay. Not as a temporary arrangement, as my actual wife, with everything that entails the danger, the family, the obligations, but also the protection, the resources, the power. You'd be untouchable, Lila. No one would ever threaten you or your mother again. You're asking me to choose between freedom and a gilded cage. I'm asking you to choose between running from danger and standing with someone who would burn the world down to keep you safe." The weight of it pressed down on me. 3 days ago, this would have been an easy decision. Take the money, run, never look back. But that was before I'd started seeing behind the mask. Before I'd realized that Damien Vescari, for all his danger and darkness, looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth protecting. "I need to think," I said. "You have 3 days." But I didn't get 3 days. That afternoon, while Damien was in meetings, I decided to walk into town. I needed space, air, perspective. Mrs. Morrison tried to insist on a driver, but I convinced her I'd be fine. It was just a mile down the road to the small village that serviced the estates. I made it halfway before I realized my mistake. The car that pulled up beside me looked normal enough, a dark sedan, tinted windows, but when the door opened and a man stepped out, I knew immediately something was wrong. "Mrs. Vescari, get in the car, please." "I'm fine walking, thanks." It wasn't a request. He moved toward me, and I ran. But there were 2 more men, appearing from behind me, cutting off my escape. One grabbed my arm, and I screamed, thrashing, but a hand clamped over my mouth. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." They dragged me into the car. I fought, landing a kick that made one of them curse. But it was 3 against 1, and they were professionals. A cloth pressed over my face, something chemical and sweet, and the world went fuzzy. The last thought I had before darkness claimed me was that Damien had been right. I should have been afraid. I woke to the smell of salt and rust. My head throbbed, vision swimming as I tried to focus. I was in a warehouse, no, a dock warehouse. I could hear water lapping against pylons. My hands were zip-tied to a metal chair, ankles similarly bound. Across from me sat a man I didn't recognize, older, maybe 60, with silver hair and a face that would have been handsome except for the cruelty in his eyes. Mrs. Vescari. Welcome. I'm Alessandro Moretti, the name from the overheard conversation. Damien's rival. What do you want? My voice came out steadier than I felt. To send a message to your husband. He's been interfering in business that doesn't concern him. Blocking shipments, cutting into my territory. I need him to understand there are consequences to such actions. We're not really. Oh, I know your marriage is a convenience, a legal formality to satisfy tradition. Moretti leaned forward, smiling. But Damien Vescari's weakness has always been his sense of responsibility. He protects what's his, even when he shouldn't care. And he's claimed you, Mrs. Vescari, which makes you the perfect leverage. Fear finally kicked in, cold and sharp. He won't give you what you want. He will. Because the alternative is finding pieces of you delivered to his doorstep. He stood, brushing invisible lint from his suit. Don't worry. We'll keep you comfortable while we wait. Damien's quite resourceful. I expect he'll find you within a day or two. The question is what state you'll be in when he does. He left, and 2 guards took positions by the door. I tested the zip ties, but they were professional grade, cutting into my wrists when I pulled. Think, Lila. Think. The warehouse was old but maintained. 1 main entrance, probably others I couldn't see. The guards were armed but looked bored, not expecting trouble. They thought I was helpless. Maybe I was, but I'd spent 4 years studying law, learning how systems worked, how people thought. And I'd spent a week in the Vescari household, absorbing the way they operated. Hey, I called to the guards. Can I get some water? One of them glanced at the other, shrugged, and approached with a bottle. He held it to my lips, and I drank, letting water dribble down my chin. Sorry, I'm nervous. Makes my hands shake. He grunted, wiping my face roughly. How long have you worked for Moretti? I asked, trying to sound curious rather than calculating. Long enough. Shut up. It's just I heard Damien talking about him. Said Moretti's operation is struggling, that the feds are closing in. Is that true? The guard's expression flickered uncertainty. Boss knows what he's doing. Of course. I'm sure he has a plan for when Damien comes. Because he will come. And he won't come alone. We're ready for him. Are you? I let doubt color my voice. I've seen Damien's resources. The men he has, the connections. He took out the Romano family in a single night last year. Did Moretti tell you that? I was lying. I had no idea if it was true. But the guard's expression suggested it might be. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe. Or maybe Moretti's using you as cannon fodder while he runs. Would you know if he was planning to abandon you? The seed was planted. I could see it taking root. Doubt, fear, the realization that maybe they were on the wrong side of this. Hours passed. The guards changed shifts. I used the time to work the zip ties against the chair's edge, feeling plastic slowly weaken. My wrists were bloody, but the pain was manageable. Then I heard it gunfire, distant but unmistakable. The guards jumped to attention, weapons drawn. More gunfire, closer now, shouting in Italian. One of the guards grabbed a radio. We're under attack, multiple hostiles. The warehouse door exploded inward. Damien strode through the smoke like an avenging angel, gun in hand, his expression colder than I'd ever seen it. Behind him came Angelo, Luca, and at least a dozen other men, all armed, all moving with military precision. Moretti's guards fired, but they were outmatched. Within seconds, both were down, and Damien was crossing to me. Lila. His hands were gentle as they cut through the zip ties, at odds with the violence still echoing around us. Are you hurt? I'm okay. Damien, Later. He pulled me up, steadying me when my legs wobbled. We need to move. But we'd barely taken 3 steps when more gunfire erupted. Damien shoved me behind a crate, returning fire with brutal efficiency. I caught glimpses of the battle, Angelo taking down 2 men, Luca providing cover fire, bodies falling. Then I saw Moretti, fleeing toward a side exit. There! I shouted, pointing. Damien's eyes followed, and something deadly flashed across his face. He handed me his gun, a Glock, heavy and warm from firing. Stay here. Anyone comes through that door who isn't us, you shoot. Then he was gone, chasing Moretti into the darkness. I crouched behind the crate, heart hammering, the gun shaking in my hands. More men poured in. Whose? I couldn't tell. Angelo was still fighting. blood streaming from a cut on his arm. Then I saw movement from the corner of my eye. A man, creeping along the wall, gun aimed at Angelo's back. I didn't think. I raised the Glock, remembered the basics from movies and instinct, and fired. The recoil shocked me, but the shot hit. The man went down with a cry. Angelo spun, saw the fallen shooter, then saw me. He nodded once, sharp and approving, then returned to the fight. More gunfire from outside, then an explosion that rattled the warehouse. My ears rang, vision swimming from adrenaline, then silence, footsteps, running. I raised the gun again, ready to fire. Damien emerged from the smoke, blood on his shirt, Moretti in front of him with hands zip-tied. He looked at me, at the gun in my hands, at the fallen man nearby. Did you? He was going to shoot Angelo. Something shifted in his expression, pride, maybe, or surprise. He pushed Moretti toward Luca, then crossed to me, gently taking the gun. Come on, we need to leave before the police arrive. Outside, cars waited. Angelo was already in one, being tended by a medic. Damien guided me to his personal vehicle, a armored SUV that looked like it could survive a missile strike. As we drove away, sirens wailing in the distance, I finally let myself shake. The adrenaline drained away, leaving me cold and exhausted. I'm sorry, Damien said quietly. This is my fault. I should have protected you better. You did protect me. You came. After you were already taken. After you were already in danger. His hands tightened on the wheel. This is what my life is, Lila. This is what it will always be, and I have no right to ask you to be part of it. I looked at him, at the blood on his shirt, the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept flicking to check on me. This man who'd stormed a warehouse full of armed men to get me back, who'd put his life on the line without hesitation. What if I want to be part of it? He pulled over abruptly, the car lurching to a stop on the empty road. He turned to me, eyes searching. You don't mean that. You're in shock. I shot a man tonight, Damien. Saved your cousin's life. Does that sound like I'm in shock? It sounds like you're traumatized. It sounds like I'm capable of more than you think. I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. You asked me to choose, freedom or staying with you. I'm choosing. Lila, I know what you are. I know the danger. But I also know that in the week I've known you, I've felt more alive than in 22 years of playing it safe. I've felt protected, valued, like I matter. And maybe that makes me crazy, but I don't care. He cupped my face with both hands, his touch reverent. You could have anyone. A normal life, safety, everything I can't give you. I don't want normal. I want real. And this, I gestured between us, this is the most real thing I've ever felt. He kissed me then, and it wasn't like the performative kiss at the courthouse. This was desperate, claiming, a promise and a question all at once. I kissed him back, tasting smoke and danger, and something that felt dangerously like love. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. The contract had a clause you didn't fully understand, he said. The marriage is valid until death or annulment. I left it in hoping you might stay. But I can remove it. Make this a real choice, not a legal trap. Leave it. I pulled back to meet his eyes. 1 week ends tomorrow, but I'm not going anywhere. He kissed me again, softer this time, like I was something precious he couldn't quite believe he got to keep. The next morning, I woke in the mansion's medical wing. The doctor confirmed I was fine. Bruised wrists, some scrapes, nothing serious. Damien sat in a chair by my bed, looking like he hadn't slept. Your mother has been told you were in a minor car accident, he said. She wanted to come, but I assured her you're fine and will visit soon. Thank you. The 3 days are up. Technically, you're free to go. I looked at the ring on my finger, the platinum band that had felt foreign a week ago. Now it felt like it belonged there. Remember the clause? I asked. Marriage valid until death? I remember. Good. Because I'm invoking it. Forever means forever, Damien Viscari. His smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges. Forever means danger, Lila. My enemies will always see you as a target. Then teach me to shoot better. I wasn't great last night. He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound rare and wonderful. You saved Angelo's life. I'd say you're a natural. Over the following weeks, I learned what it meant to be Mrs. Viscari. I attended family meetings, sat in on business discussions, learned the delicate balance between legitimate operations and the shadows. Sophia, surprisingly, became an ally, teaching me the unspoken rules and power dynamics. Angelo recovered and insisted on buying me a drink to celebrate his continued existence. Maria welcomed me like a sister. Even Luca softened, grudgingly admitting I was tougher than expected. I continued my studies, but now with family lawyers helping me understand corporate law from the inside. Damien was true to his word. He supported my goals, just redirected them slightly. Why work for free legal clinics when I could work for the family, protecting our people from legal threats? It was morally complicated. But then, so was everything about this life. 6 months later, I stood in that same garden where I'd first dangled my feet in the pool, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. Damien came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Regret it yet?" he murmured against my ear. "Every day," I said, then smiled when he stiffened. "I regret not asking for more money. 50,000 seems cheap, now that I know what I'm worth." He spun me around, eyes dancing with amusement. "You're priceless. I'd have paid millions. I'll remember that for next time. There won't be a next time. You're stuck with me." He kissed my forehead, gentle and possessive. "Forever, Mrs. Viscari." "Forever," I agreed, "but on my terms. Always on your terms." And there, in the garden of the mansion that had once felt like a prison, I realized something. I'd started this journey desperate, accepting a deal I didn't understand with a man I didn't know. I'd been terrified, overwhelmed, convinced it was temporary. But somewhere between the courthouse and the warehouse, between fear and gunfire, I'd stopped playing a role. I'd become Mrs. Viscari, not the temporary wife, not the convenient outsider, but the real thing. I'd married a Mafia boss thinking it would last a week. Instead, I'd found forever, and I'd chosen it freely. The simple student who'd accepted a 1-week marriage was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, more dangerous, more alive. Someone who knew the price of power and paid it willingly. Someone who loved a man who could destroy the world with a word but chose instead to protect the people he claimed as his. In the end, it wasn't the week that changed me. It was the decision to stay, and I'd make that same choice every single day for the rest of my life. Forever wasn't a trap. It was a promise, and I intended to keep it.